So people are saying that Pope Francis and the Vatican lied to Catholics about the Latin Mass issue. Of course, Pope Francis retracted or reversed Pope Benedict XVI's Summorum Pontificum that allowed for a more widespread access to the Latin Mass. Of course, Summorum Pontificum itself was reversing a more stricter document by John Paul II, effectively limiting access to the Latin Mass. Pope Benedict opened it up a little bit more, and Francis dialed that back for a number of reasons. One among many of the reasons was that he said that many of the bishops of the world asked him to do this. What's come out, according to some, that various reports are not reflecting that information. Some are saying that recent reports released by journalists indicate that the data doesn't really back up the notion that the bishops wanted, a great deal of restriction on the Latin Mass. And some people are saying, okay, well, that's proof that Pope Francis lied to them and therefore decided to restrict access to the Latin Mass, not because it's what bishops were wanting, but rather because whenever you got the feedback from the bishops, it's not what he had hoped for, and so he just fudged the data and lied and restricted its access anyway. And so a lot of people are saying, you see, this is proof that we are at war with the Vatican. And these are Catholics who are saying they're at war with the Vatican. It's a fascinating notion when you come to the conclusion as a Catholic that you have to fight against the institutional church. And here we're not just talking about the Vatican, we're talking about the papacy itself. The papacy is something that Catholics are now saying they are at war with. Sounds pretty familiar, does it not? Can you think of some instances in church history where people who say they're Catholic were at war with the papacy? For one reason or another, whether their cause was just or not. Can you think of maybe some instances? It's pretty curious. It's a fascinating statement. But what conclusion does it really lead one to at the end of the day? If you're at war with the papacy, where does that really lead you? When you come to the point where you're at war with the institutional church, you have to start asking some deep questions, I think. And it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out in practice, how people are able to maybe theologically work through this by claiming that they're Catholics in good standing, but they're at war with the institutional church, the visible teaching authority and governing structure of the church. I'm just not exactly sure how that works out. Be that as it may, it is a fascinating question. Did Pope Francis just lie? Or is the data something that he misunderstood? In other words, he was told that the bishops wanted greater restrictions, but they lied to the Pope, and so maybe he acted in good faith, but advisors lied to him? Or did he know better and he just lied? Or what was recently released, is that just skewed data and there's other information out there that needs to be considered? These are all legitimate questions to ask. It would be pretty fascinating to find out if Pope Francis lied to people. What's going to be even more fascinating is going to be finding out how Pope Leo XIV deals with this situation. Is he going to restrict access to the Latin Mass further, or is he going to open it up more? We'll see. Pope Francis was kind of a mixed bag on the question. He did allow for access to the Latin Mass in parish churches on a case-by-case basis. In some cases he approved of it, in a few others he denied it, so it just kind of depends on the situation. It'll be interesting to see what Pope Leo XIV ends up doing here. Again, it will also be interesting to see how people will react to this. If people don't get their way here, they don't get more access to the Latin Mass, what will that do to their faith? Will they start looking for Eastern Orthodoxy? Will they start looking for non-Catholic options? Will they say, you know what, this particular form of the Mass is so important to me that I'm going to leave the Catholic Church over it. Which would be a little ironic, because if you leave the Catholic Church, you wouldn't have access to the Latin Mass. So it would be an interesting point to leave the church over. But it will be curious to see how people react to Pope Leo XIV and how he might handle this, because I suspect that he's probably going to just continue to go along with what Pope Francis did here with Traditionis Custodes, and I suspect he's not really going to reverse the reversal of the reversal of the reversal of the reversal on the Latin Mass at this point. I just don't see him doing that. There's just been so many reversals at this point on this particular issue, and it seems like he wants to be in harmony with Pope Francis, that I think it's unlikely. But who knows, maybe he'll surprise everybody and give people more access to it. But if he doesn't, the question is, what will people do? They're going to start looking for other options? Are they going to conclude that Catholicism has been falsified because of this? Are they just going to hang around but just be really upset, disgruntled, if you will? I guess we'll find out. I want to know what you, however, think about this point and how you think this will play out. Put your answer, of course, in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you. And of course, don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button.